Hey everyone, in this video I'm interviewed by a fourth year student journalist at the University of Illinois. I hope you enjoy. My name's Josh Chamberlain. I own and operate a tea shop in Eugene, Oregon. I started that through a series of events, but basically I was a student and one of my passions was learning Chinese, Mandarin Chinese. So that was my area of focus. Then I ended up moving to Taiwan and spending several years there. I didn't have the intention of opening a tea shop or being in the tea business. I had no idea. I was just, a young college student that really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And eventually, after I graduated, I moved to southern Taiwan, which was originally I'd lived in Taipei, which is the capital, and it's a very modern city. Once I moved to southern Taiwan, that was where a lot of the it's like the cultural capital of Taiwan. And in that place, I was exposed to a lot of rich cultural heritage and activity, and one of them being the tea culture. But it was even just before that where I was living there, and one of my favorite things to do every day was to drink tea and study Chinese. So I really liked the tea, and so I was just very curious about it because I hadn't experienced anything like that in the US. And this was back in the late 90s. I had never seen or experienced anything like that. It was, tea bags, and there wasn't a lot. Now there's a lot more in terms of the specialized vendors. There's a lot more access to high quality tea in the US, but it's still not a tea culture by any means. So that's sort of accidentally. Then I ended up meeting mentors and people that were cultural ambassadors of tea in Taiwan, and they took me under their wing, and I developed relationships with these people and sort of accidentally started importing tea and then I got an account with a wholesale. I met a tea shop owner that said he wanted me to help him source some tea. I didn't even know what kind of tea he was talking about, but I just knew. I was like, okay, well, I know who knows, so I'll go talk to those people, and I'll write you when I get back to Taiwan. Yeah, I ended up then sourcing a large amount of tea for that shop, but in that process I realized, well, there's probably other shops that want this tea too. And so I basically took that risk and purchased more and ended up contacting and wholesaling the tea to several shops and then just started building up that through living in Taiwan and then being able to visit tea farms, and so then I was just like, okay, at that time it seemed like there wasn't a lot of people in the US that had access to that tea, so I was just facilitating with that. Yeah, now I have a tea shop, and that was 20 years ago, so a lot has changed and a lot has evolved in the process of learning how we want to operate our business, and we've gone through a lot to be able to get to the place we're at now. If we look at something through a cultural lens or what, but I remember there was this book popular at some point, maybe it was 17 years ago, maybe it was 12, I don't know. It was something like 3 cups of tea, and it was like this sort of conflict resolution through tea, and it was really popular book. It had a big influence, I feel like, in the US. And one of my tea mentors, this tea cultural ambassador in a way, he's like old wise man, and he had studied different areas because in Taiwan or China, even China, different regions, they have different tea tradition. He would study those traditions and learn about them, and then he would document it, and then he would either share that or just sort of, it was like his passion, right? And I'll never forget, he said to me, if I don't like the company, I won't make tea. And I think that's really important. Tea, why ruin good tea with people you don't like? It's not about conflict resolution. That might be applicable to some, sort of, a conflict resolution minded person. But this is about enjoyment. Tea is about living the good life. It's like if you're sitting in your hot tub and you're like, oh, this is so relaxing. And then you're going to invite people you don't like. No, So I think that there's this romanticization, I don't know how you say that, but it's like this idea that tea is going to solve a problem. Maybe it will. Basically, it's a tool for reflection, and I feel like that's a more individual thing. I've also I have a customer who has a business, and he uses tea a lot in his business, where he'll use tea to facilitate creativity and stimulate conversation. And there's a huge benefit to that. He would say every time we'd come to an impasse, I would pour tea, and you'd be amazed at the creativity and the ideas that would come out. So tea is a very powerful. What can America learn? America is a very big subject in itself. It's funny because tea is a lot like, wine in a way, but tea is socially acceptable to drink alone. So tea, whether it being alone, alone is a great value to drinking tea because it's a contemplative, it's an introspective. Drink tea, study, drink tea, write your journal, drink tea, think, just think about what's going on. And there are a lot of benefits to that. So that's a more introspective thing, where when you drink tea with 1, 2, or 3 other people, and especially too, like your family, it's a really cool way to spend time together. But also it's really fun to drink tea with somebody that you know really well, and that you think you've talked about everything that there is to talk about already, and you've covered every subject, and you're like looking at each other and there's not really anything to talk about. Guaranteed, if you make tea, you're going to start talking and have like a good conversation. In southern Taiwan, for example, there's a sort of a special situation where the way the architecture is they have these like a overhang, the first floor to a 2 or 3 story building, which is a typical kind of household, like a row housing sort of thing. Maybe it's a block of 6 of them or what. There's going to be this sort of gate that's locked. You open that gate and you walk underneath the floor of the second floor a little bit, and then you go into your entrance, right? But that area that's covered and locked from the outside, some people use it as a carport. Like sometimes they modify it to have like a garage door come down, or some people use it to park their scooters, or some people just use it to like keep all their gear, like their raincoats and their shoes and their whatever. And then some people have plants. Any number of use in that space. It's totally, everybody has their own idea and what they want to do there. Well, some of them, people put their tea table, and then in a lot of neighborhoods, you'll have a person that's super into tea, and they'll have a really big tea table in there, and then in the daytime, they'll just open that, all the doors, they have it completely open, and neighbors will come by, and then they'll be like, oh, come on, drink tea. And then everybody knows that guy is there, or his family is there making tea, and then people will come and sort of share some whatever the news is, and then they might drink, just like they might have a cup like about this size, and then they just the host will pour their tea, and they might just drink 1 cup and leave, or they might drink several and stay for a while, but it's a very like a focal point where everybody shares their news. Just tea culture is so kind of specific to regions, and there's so many places I haven't been that the tea is hugely significant. So it's just kind of interesting to say, like, to observe and say like, oh, that's how they do tea, and just see that is like, it's almost like I don't give it a lot of thought so much. I just might see it and go, noted. And then for me, my real passion, or like what I'm really interested in, is the I'm not sure if it's showing up, but just this style of tea with Southern Chinese method that has been spread. It's very popular in Taiwan and in that sort of area. Well, they call gongfu cha, gongfu tea, or laoran cha. Sometimes it's called old people's tea, and it's just a style of brewing tea that, with regard to the tea leaf, the high quality tea, the best way to make the best tea you can. Yeah, again, it's about enjoyment and just relax and feeling good. A lot of tea, I think, just generally to that question, is like, that's going to be kind of a universal aspect. Is there's a social part where you drink tea with your friends, and then two, like, it's a form of enjoyment. Tea culture has definitely grown in the US. I think that's generally a good thing, because it's a way for people to connect with the earth. I think that's a really profound, small thing that tea, either consciously or subconsciously, people, when they're enjoying tea, it's part of that. And again, there are a lot of small tea businesses, or tea, like especially really small tea businesses that have activity around tea, yeah? And it's a really good alternative to like alcohol, or like, because again, the US is mostly like an alcohol forward kind of culture, and to have tea as like a social lubricant, if you will, like, or like a way to hang out with people that isn't involving alcohol, I think that's really beneficial. But I think that's really small, like a very small, but it also has the potential, to increase in that. But again, yeah, tea, it's kind of funny because tea is a plant that we process to create this pretty simple beverage. There's not hundreds of millions of dollars behind it to promote it and that, whereas alcohol is like a huge industry. But again, and I think those social connections that I'm a tea house owner, like I'm a owner and operator. My perspective is one that, like, okay, I don't really feel like there's a right way. I've been doing this for so long. There's not like a right way and a wrong way. And a lot of how I feel like about tea is a lot of how I feel about religion. Hey man, you can do what you want. All I have is questions, so why would I try and impose some kind of belief system? So tea especially, I think that it's just like, sure, I'll share what I know, or I'll try to help people understand like what tea is. But then what you do with it, that's totally up to you, and yeah, have fun.